Empire, I separate my wants and needs. I'm put that way in Germany. And the price is getting higher. I'm sleeping on my enemies. The little they don't mean nothing to me. So they hate why you untired. I got a preference. She eat that dick for breakfast. You see, I'm interested. I wanna feel your best friend. You know with profession, and got good for direction. My niggas on the kiosk. This why I put it in the TI. With no fish, mostly in the CI. Drinking out of VI. We see it just like TI. Goes going in the night, look like a neon. Fucking hoes, you know I'm catching shit like Neon. I was broke, but I ain't going back. This ain't that shit deal. Get on me back. You call my phone too much at once, and I'll never hit back. Hopefully you get that finish done, you won't go lay on your back. I was wanna win. Love look at me, might have to sin again. It's crazy, great, you had a trend. Lot of niggas need a land. It's crazy, great, you had a trend. I'm like a baby, let me in. I need an angel, not a friend. Protection that I never had. Anything we get it cream. I be living out our dreams. And the whole world hours. Got our bosses in the team. We bust it down, don't need a degree. Tryna build an empire. I separate my wants and needs. I'm put that way in Germany. And the price is getting higher. I'm peeping on my enemies. If the whole shit, it don't mean nothing to me. Know they hate why you untired. Always been official, I never did no knockoff. Put up with a roof on and she told me to the top off. Tryna get my rocks out, she said don't want her socks off. Then when me get that lockjaw, people do me out, I ain't no jigsaw. This is how play for keys and learn to lay low. Shoot it up like Halo. She stand up here with the rest of family in San Diego. One of the ones that keep it real to this day though.
Look, I'm like, what's cracking? She like, Pop, I got a man. I'm like, damn, how you know me? Said she got me on the bed. I said, look, I understand, but baby, I'm the fan. Cause you the baddest bitch I ever see walk on the land. She said, what's that on your face? And I said, it's a cold girl. Baby, buying your lips, though, got me like, oh, girl. Get money and stay aggressive. Baby, it's your world. More talking to teeth. Baby, you go, girl. Who you with? I'm with the lions and gorillas, skin babies and drug dealers. So I'm skinners and I'm killers who I hang with. Yeah, it tastes good, you know, I'm using my sandwich. They 23 and everybody know I'm sanctioned. Blocks, if I shoot, I'ma shoot that. Go and I'ma go back. Yeah, I'm from the floor, you know the language. I put it on the table so that everything is clear. Put the diamonds on your necklace to next them on your head. She like send me a text. The egg did it nice. She was straight up in the bed. Lifting up her dress, had her put over the ledge. Kissing on her neck when she was thinking me head. What's next? Look, let me fuck you, let me suck you, let me hit you, let me hold you. Let me put it on that pussy like you wanna get supposed to. If you ain't know I had the power, let me show you. Chalk on your blick, me ain't been had no.
You haven't met another nigga like you say you looking for me, you got the right one. She said, do you handsome, boy, you sexy, boy, you fire. Oh, you never met another nigga like me. Keep it real, I'm looking for a wifey. She find me, she said, do you baby, you so sexy, you fire.
I'ma call you every day at 12 o'clock. How you doing? Like, when about your day and that new bag that I bought you from Fetty. I'ma treat you right as long as you let me. Louis Vuitton at Giuseppe's. All I do is chase Fetty. Know I ride with that Seppi, so let me know when you get it. I'ma pull up in a bench, his fingers collecting funds. Grabbing on your ass, got a rollie on my wrist. Baby, we could bring a friend, that's when the party begin. All the pockets on my collar ain't no, it's just been Gucci. I ain't pass your block, bumping while you saying Gucci. You say you talking is cheap, so you know I had to prove it. So I make this show so you can add it to your music. I'm top 10, yeah, I ain't never kept it fancy. Like Jimmy Fox, I'm always keeping fancy. Use your trick. Feel like fishing dead. Put me on any block, you know I'ma get it dead.
You haven't met another nigga like you say you looking for me, you got the right one. She said, do you handsome, boy, you sexy, boy, you fire. You ain't never met another nigga like me. Keep it real, I'm looking for a wifey. She find me, she said, do you baby, you so sexy, boy, you fire.
All right, we finna get into this. Finna see how I can configure this PowerPoint real quick, cause you know I got a dual monitor setup, so it's acting kind of wonky when I try to put it in the presentation mode. But we gonna get it working. So let's just see real quick before I get started. I want to make sure everybody could see this to the best of everyone's ability. So just give me a quick second. And I'm going to have this all nice and beamed up for y'all. All nice and beamed up for y'all. Okay, so let's see. What's the share screen looking like right now? I may just keep it like this. If it's not going to work in the full presentation mode, it don't really matter. Y'all can see it anyway. So anyways, let's get into it. The first Black person to earn a Ph.D. in the United States. Now, you see the subtitle up under the initial title. It says 1/16 Black versus Black. Now, you see and faded in the background, blurred out, you got one man to the left and you got one man to the right. Now, there is a story as to why I wanted to talk about this, and we're going to get into that right now. And like I said, I apologize for it not being in presentation mode. It's acting wonky because I use two monitors. But y'all can see it anyway. So we are good. Now, every day, every morning, right, I go and I Google Black history and I insert the date. So yesterday, what I did, it was July 31st yesterday. I woke up, my morning reads, I go Black history, July 31st. And I scroll through the website, scroll through the sites. And this is a site that I like to use sometimes because they offer a lot of facts, right? Blackfacts.com. Now I'm looking at the fact on the day, and it says Patrick Francis Healy, president of Georgetown. So I'm like, okay, this seems interesting. Let me click this. And then I read it, and it says Patrick Francis Healy, first Black man to receive a PhD. Now, I read that, and my mind had an epiphany. I'm like, okay, hold up. Automatically, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I understood something wrong or they have something incorrect. Because when I think of the first Black person to have a PhD, I'm thinking of a whole different three-man named individual that comes up, if you Google first Black person to earn a PhD. So when I see Patrick Francis Healy, they say he's the first Black person to earn that PhD. I immediately go into Google mode. So I Google Patrick Francis Healy because I'm like, okay, who is this? So I see this picture of Patrick Francis Healy, and I'm like, all right, so this got to be a white passing biracial. Is he a quadroon? Did I spell the name wrong? I'm like, how did this, the whitest of white looking dudes pop up as the first Black man to earn a PhD? What's funny is here in my university, I got a professor, right? I had a professor. His name was Dr. George, and he was one of the only professors that I actually liked. And he was like the whitest looking dude on the planet, real cool dude. But like, if you were to draw a white person, he's what an older white person would look like. And this dude right here looks just like Dr. George. Like, this supposed first Black man to earn a PhD looked about as white as snow. This man looked just like the whitest man I've ever seen in my entire life. So I continue to think. Then boom, I go to researching who he is. Now, Patrick Francis Healy was born on February 27th, 1834 in Macon, Georgia, to a father named Michael Morris Healy and a mother named Mary Eliza Smith. In parentheses is Clark because different websites had different documentation of whether her surname was Smith or whether it was Clark. But I'm like, okay, so this dude look about as white as you can get, but we got names of his parents. So I'm gonna go into looking into who his parents are, because obviously somewhere along the line, we talking about the early to mid 1800s. What was considered Black back then is a lot different than what's considered Black now. He could be a quadroon, octoroon. He might even just be a white passing biracial. But I go into looking into who his parents are. So let's move on to Michael Morris Healy. Now, this is Patrick Francis Healy's father. Michael Morris Healy in 1818 immigrated from Ireland to the United States through Canada. Now, looking at this map, what you'll see on this map is this is an immigration map that talks about where Irish migrated in 1890. Now, obviously, this is way after 1818, but it's still relevant because I want y'all to pay attention to down here in Georgia, right? So if you look down here in Georgia, you have these two tiny little dark green areas where, as opposed to up north where a lot of the Irish went, especially up in what we call New England now, some of them landed in this Georgia area, these two little spots on the east and west sides of the state. That sparked my interest. So moving on, keep in mind, we in Georgia. Now, Mike, oh shit, hold up. That's what happens when you click buttons. Can't get in presentation mode. All right, my bad. So as we see, Michael Morris Healy is a white Irish immigrant. So that already answers part of the question for us. Is Patrick Francis Healy a white passing biracial? Could be a quadroon, could be an octoroon, but we do at least know his father is a white man and directly from Europe. We talking about Irish. So this is white. This isn't watered down white. This isn't American white. We talking about a straight from European white man. So this is his father. Now, his father ends up going to Georgia, right? And he wins land from these Georgia land lotteries. Now, these Georgia lotteries were these things that they had in the early 19th century where they would redistribute this land in Georgia that they would get from certain Native American tribes, and they would try to redistribute it in order to give back a lot of this land to white people, right? They wanted to remove it from Native Americans. They wanted to get it as close to white people as they should. Now, we know immigrants were not treated nearly the same as your white Americans back then. Your immigrants were treated almost as poorly as your black people back then. But in order to get away from these Native Americans that they took, they want to give it to any white or white passing man that's around that can win. So Michael Morris Healy, Patrick's father, wins this land in Georgia from these lotteries, and he builds a cotton plantation along the Ocmulgee River, right? The Ocmulgee River. So in this picture, what you see is the Ocmulgee River. So like I said, if you paid attention in the last slide to those green spots where the Irish landed, this where the river branches off into two, these are two areas where the Irish settled at. So we had a heavy settlement spot over on the west, and we had one over on the east. Now, he goes on to own 1,500 acres of land throughout Jones County. And by doing that, he became one of the greatest landowners in that county at that time. And he had a very prosperous cotton plantation with about 49 different slaves, right? You feeling me? 49 slaves on his plantation. We talking about an immigrant from Ireland coming through Canada, coming through the U.S. He just happens to win this land, and he turned it into something great. So we see Patrick's father had a little bit going for him. He had a little bit of savviness to him. He was able to turn this land that he won into this prosperous cotton plantation. Of those 49 slaves, one of those slaves happened to be Patrick's mother, right? Now, who is Patrick's mother? Mary Eliza Smith. Like I said, there's not too much clarity on what her surname is. It could have been Smith or it could have been Clark, both, but we'll go with Smith for right now. So Mary Eliza was bought in 1829 by Michael Morris Healy when he got this plantation. She was one of his 49 slaves. Now, Mary Eliza was an octoroon. So keep in mind, Patrick Francis, excuse me, what the fuck? Something wrong with my, something got caught in my throat. Patrick Francis Healy was this white passing dude, right? So he has a white father, and then he has an octoroon mom. So we're going to get into it later about who Patrick really was and what that term would be for somebody who's 1/16 black. But Mary Eliza, his mother, an octoroon. Where did she come from? She had a quadroon parent who fled from Saint Domingue during the Haitian Revolution. Now, Saint Domingue was a French colony back at that time that was on the same island as what we would call the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So Saint Domingue was on the Haitian side of the island. Obviously, her quadroon parent, who, if you don't know, quadroon is 1/4 white. Her 1/4 white parent escaped Saint Domingue during that revolution. So even Patrick's grandmother on his mother's side isn't even a black person by today's standard. That's 1/4 white. That's like Drake's son. You know what I'm saying? Drake is half black. His son is only a quarter black. So that's where Patrick's mama came from. So far we have that Patrick is only 1/16 black, like I said in the title. Let's move on. Now, when we go through this, what I thought was funny in doing some of my research was that on the Smithsonian Magazine website, they have an article written all about Patrick Francis Healy, right? And the article was called Born Enslaved, Patrick Francis Healy Passed His Way to Lead Georgetown University, right? And why I have this screenshot here is because I thought it was funny how, although the way we classify what a black person is today, it can be misconstrued depending on what a person identifies as black, right? So if we read this, it says Patrick Healy was one of 9 children born to Michael Healy, an Irish immigrant and a wealthy Georgia plantation owner. Patrick's mother, Eliza Clark, was a biracial enslaved woman and legally the property of Healy, right? Now I have biracial highlighted because technically speaking, at that time, with Eliza Clark being a quadroon, she's 1/4 black. What they're saying is because she had one parent who was half black, at that time, that half black parent would have been considered a black person. And that quadroon parent had a baby with a white man. So what this article did was essentially look at Eliza Clark's mom as a black woman, even though she was actually a quadroon, right? They looked at her mother as a black woman, or they didn't say mother. They looked at one of her parents as a black woman, even though she was a quadroon. There's research to back that she was a quadroon. And so it was kind of funny how they also followed these early 1800, mid 1800 classifications of what a black person would be. But moving on, so Eliza was in fact an octoroon, but this Smithsonian article says that she was biracial because they looked at they considered a quadroon to be a black person. And I just thought that was funny, so I wanted to point it out. But we can move on to the next slide. So moving on with the history, soon after that, Michael Healy purchases Eliza, makes her one of his 49 slaves. They perform a common law marriage. Now, what a common law marriage is, for y'all who don't know, basically it's like an informal type of marriage where the marriage, they don't have a marriage license, but it's a marriage based on agreement and cohabitation. So based on the fact that they agreed to be married and based on the fact that they lived together, they were able to have an unofficial official marriage, also known as that common law. And we know they had to do that because, you know, interracial marriage was prohibited by the anti-miscegenation laws back at that time. Excuse my stuttering. I got some in my throat right now. That's why I never do these live streams. My voice is not made for talking a lot. But anyway, moving on. So Michael buys Eliza. He marries her when she's 16. I don't have exactly how old he was, but he married her when she was 16 in 1829. What ends up happening is they have 9 children, and that third child ends up being Patrick Francis Healy. Now, in this image, I have Patrick Healy. He's the sepia color image, the second to the left, or the first to the left, rather. And on all the other sides, you have 3 of his other siblings. Now, he has some siblings who, a lot of his siblings actually ended up being some high-ranking members of the Catholic Church. And that's what a lot of them ended up doing. He also had a brother who was a high-ranking captain at a Marine, I guess you would call it Marine defense up in Alaska, where they had basically like naval ships and Marine bases up in the Alaska area. And he had one brother who was a head captain up there and a prominent captain throughout that station's history. So the Healy family ended up being very successful, very well known. He had 3 sisters become nuns as well. One notable nun who was named after Eliza. So, and they all get considered the first black everything. So just like Patrick Healy is considered the first black man to earn a Ph.D. by some, the rest of his siblings, the rest of his 1/16 black siblings also get considered the first black everything. Now, that's the funny part. But moving on to how Patrick Healy earned his Ph.D., let's just go straight to that point. The Healy children are sent up north by their dad because since they were born into slavery, they couldn't go to school in Georgia. So in order to find somewhere where they could get educated, Michael sent all the kids up north. So this Quaker academy called Flusher Quaker Academy was the school that they were able to find that would accept their children up in New York. Now, Flusher was also known as Queens nowadays in the 2000s and 1900s, but back then that city, or that settlement rather, was referred to as Flusher. Now, the Quaker Academy, Patrick attends this academy for some time, and then he graduates at 16 years old, right? And then he goes to the College of the Holy Cross in 1850. So when he graduates from the College of the Holy Cross, because they weren't chartered as a university, he was able to get his degree chartered by Georgetown. And what charter basically means is that this College of the Holy Cross wasn't actually formally recognized as a university to be able to distribute degrees, but Georgetown was chartered above that school. And so he was able to be given a bachelor's degree from Georgetown. Moving on, and this image is just what Georgetown looked like at that time, or a drawing rather of what Georgetown campus looked like back at that time. Now, in 1858, Healy attends Georgetown University again, like the actual Georgetown. So not that he just got the degree from it by attending the College of whatever that school was called, the College of Hopes. I forgot already. He actually goes to the real Georgetown University where he got the bachelor's degree chapter from. The professors there really liked his talents. They really liked his intelligence. He studied philosophy and Catholic theology. What they did was they sent him to Europe to continue his studies because he was so good and so proficient. So he made stops in Rome. He made stops in Paris, ended up getting the actual Ph.D. in Belgium. That's where he got his Ph.D. in philosophy at the age of 31. This is how he became known as the first Black man to get a Ph.D. And all I have at this little thing right here is basically saying that he became Black America's first Ph.D. earner. And that's where we're disagreeing in this presentation. Now, let's think back to what Patrick Francis Healy really is. Patrick Francis Healy, with a fully white Irish dad and an octoroon mom who came from Haiti at that time, Santo Domingue, is only 6.25% Black. Now, they got all these different names on what they call that back at that time. A person who was 1/16th Black, a hectodecaroon, a quintroon, a mustafino. In Saint Domingue, where his mom was from, where she escaped during the Haitian Revolution, he would have been considered a Mameluke. That was the Santo Domingue term for a person who was 1/16th Black. But at the end of the day, we know that Patrick Francis Healy is only 6.25% Black. Now, in modern times, we know that you're not Black if you're only 6.25% Black. You a white boy. You are 100% a white boy, no matter how much Black is in you. At that point, you 1/16th Black, yeah, you a white boy. But we know back at that time, things were different. So they wanted to make anybody with white blood be considered as Black as possible. Now, the reason I find this significant is because there's Black websites out there saying that he's the first Black person to earn a PhD. When, okay, yeah, back in the mid-1800s, that was true. He was the first Black person at that time, 200 years ago. Well, a little less under 200 years to earn a PhD. In today's time, he's not the Black first anything. He's not the Black person, not the first Black person to earn a PhD. He's considered the first and only Black president of Georgetown University. He's not that either. Anything he's considered the first Black of is not true. It's not true in today's time. He don't even look a little bit Black. Damn near got a white name, Patrick Francis Healy. 6.25% Black. Like, I just find that to be funny. So you either, kind of like Cocaine said, they're either not Black owned when they put stuff like that on their website, or they're the type of Black people who hold on to that one drop rule still. They're the type of Black people who say, oh, he had African descent, so he's a brother. He's one of us. Just because he didn't look like us doesn't exactly mean he wasn't us. You know, if he was labeled the first Black man to do XYZ, we have to take that label, because otherwise the white man is going to try to take it from us, right? Could be those kind of Black people who run these kind of websites. But another thing that I thought was funny in doing research was that we learned that Patrick Francis Healy didn't even identify as a black man. He went through life identifying as a white man, him and all his siblings. Him and all his siblings identified as white people, mainly because they were able to white pass. And if you can white pass in the early 1800s, why would you identify as a black person? That's just setting yourself up to make your life way more difficult than it needs to be. So let's read this excerpt from the same Smithsonian website that considered his mom to be biracial, even though she was an octoroon. This piece says, today Georgetown proudly and openly refers to Healy as the first black president of a predominantly white university. He's also celebrated as the first American of African ancestry to earn a Ph.D. Now, the way they worded that, technically it would be right, but we know what they mean is like considering him a black person. But in his lifetime, Healy would have rejected these recognitions as he rejected the identity of black and African American. He would have rejected these recognitions as he rejected the identity of black and African American. Now, ain't that about a mug? You got this man who in 2022, we can Google him, and there are supposedly black ran sites giving out black facts called blackfacts.com. And there's other sites that have this as well, with him labeled as the first black man to earn a PhD. And he didn't even consider himself black. He actually not only didn't consider it, but he rejected being labeled as black or African American. So you got these websites calling him the first black anything, and he identified himself as a white boy. That's a whole white boy. He looked like a white boy, got a white boy name. White boy is a father, damn near a white woman as his mom, pretty much. That's a white boy. So this had me thinking of, okay, who's the other person who I actually know to be the first black person to earn a PhD? Because like I said, I saw this. I didn't know who Patrick Francis Healy really was. I knew the first black man to earn a PhD as someone else. So now we're going to get into who that person is. And that man is named Edward Alexander Boucher. And somebody already said in the chat, I think it was Melvin or Cocaine, I can't even remember, but somebody already said it in the chat earlier, like when I first started. Edward Alexander Boucher. This is who I know to be the first black man to earn a PhD. Now we could look at him. The nigga look black. You don't even got to question that. We can see even through the color of the picture at the time, because of course they didn't have fully colored film like we have now. You can see that his skin is pretty dark. This is a brown skinned dude or a dark skinned dude. You could tell by his hair. Yeah, that's black hair. That's black skin. This is an undeniably black man. Like, this is a nigga you might go back to where you grew up and you see a nigga with this face on the corner, walking, or, you go downtown, you see a black man with this exact same face. He probably got a bunch of doppelgangers walking around today. That's how black Edward Alexander Boucher is. So we gonna go and talk about Edward Alexander Boucher, the first real actual black man, black person to earn a PhD. Let's get into his history. So we know Edward was born on September 15th, 1852 in New Haven, Connecticut. His father goes by the name of William Francis Boucher, and his mama went by the name of Susan Cooley Boucher, her surname being Cooley. Now, his father has a little bit of an interesting history of his own that I learned a couple things, at least a bit more in depth, from reading back on his father. So we're going to read in depth on who his father is and a little bit of research that's out there about who his mom was, just like we did Patrick Francis Healy's parents. So William Francis Boucher, this is Edward's father. He was born in the slavery in 1817 in Charleston, South Carolina, right? And this image is just a map of Connecticut, as we see on the left, because he was brought to New Haven, Connecticut in 1824 while enslaved by a Yale student. The dude who owned William Francis Boucher was really young, a college student, wasn't really like a prominent slave owner or anything, but he was a slave owner. So, they give him the credit as a slave owner, right? Now, the interesting part that drew me by surprise was William Francis was freed in 1842 at the age of 25. Now, it's a pretty interesting story of why he was freed at 25, and we're going to get into that. So this is going to be like a quick little quick little mini history lesson within this history lesson. So the reason William Francis was freed was due to Connecticut's Gradual Emancipation Act of 1784. Now, here we have an actual excerpt of what the Emancipation Act actually said at that time, and we're going to read it. So it says, and whereas found policy requires that the abolition of slavery should be effected as soon as may be, confident with the rights of individuality and the public safety of welfare. Therefore, be it enabled that no Negro or mulatto child that shall after the first day of March 1784 be born within this state shall be held in servitude longer than until they arrive to the age of 25 years, notwithstanding that the mother or parent of such child was held in servitude at the time of his birth, but such child at the age aforesaid shall be free. Any law, usage, or custom to the contrary notwithstanding. Now, we know that was a mouthful to read and to say, because this is something from 1784. Now, as a quick little sidebar, I want to mention how y'all know that Willie Lynch letter, right? That's supposed to be written in the early 1700s. That Willie Lynch letter, that's supposed to be the reason why the black men and the black women are still at odds today, and the white man did a good job of breeding us to fight against each other, right? You know that Willie Lynch letter that's supposedly written in the early 1700s. The Willie Lynch letter has much clearer English that I can read very smoothly today than this Gradual Emancipation Act of 1784 does. And this act is actually like somewhere between 70 and 80 years after that Willie Lynch letter. Like, even if you look at this document, that a lot of the S's look like F's, like these lowercase S's look like whole F's. When you look at the word 7, that S looks like a whole F. The language they use is very archaic, notwithstanding nobody says that anymore. Aforesaid, nobody says that anymore. But in that Willie Lynch letter, you got all kind of modern language in there. You know, they use words like fuel and using metaphors like that are modern euphemisms. So that's just a quick little sidebar. But we see from this Emancipation Act that Edward's father was freed at the age of 25. And I'm going to translate this document just so we can get like a modern translation of what it would actually say. So this is kind of how the Willie Lynch letter reads, because I just typed this 2 hours ago, this modern translation of what that archaic ass language would say. So the translation is that, be it enacted, no black or biracial children born in this state being Connecticut, after March 1st, 1784, shall be held as a slave longer than until they reach the age of 25, in spite of the mother or parent of such child being held as a slave at the time of his birth. But such child at the age previously mentioned shall be free, regardless of any law, usage, or custom to the contrary. So essentially, that just means if you were born after March 1st, 1784, if you were black or biracial and you live in Connecticut, you will be granted your freedman status or your free woman status just automatically, because they're no longer holding any of you as slaves after that point. Even if your mother was born into slavery and you were born into slavery, you don't got to be a slave no more. So that's what that Emancipation Act stated. And that's why William was freed at 25. Now, when William was freed at 25, he married Susan Cooley that exact same year, 1842. Now, William went on to work as a server, a janitor, and a porter at Yale. And if you don't know what a porter is, that's kind of archaic language too. A porter is just somebody who carries people's luggage, people's bags. So they were going around, carrying people's bags. And his wife, Susan, did the Yale students' laundry. So they end up both working at Yale up in New Haven, Connecticut. And to the left, that's just what the Yale University looked like back at that time in the 1800s. Once again, a drawn depiction. Now, Susan and William went on to have 4 children, and that 4th child ended up being Edward. Now, Edward ended up being the only boy, and he ended up being last. So you end up being the only boy, you the last born, you kind of destined to do something great. You feel what I'm saying? It's kind of lined up in the works. So now let's get into Edward's history. So Edward first attended the Artisan Street Colored School. And that's because there was only 3 schools in New Haven, Connecticut that accepted black children. Now, the Artisan Street Colored School which is now referred to as the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Masons. So that building is actually listed as like a historical land site where you can go and visit and see, historical things about the Masons. I don't want to go see that, but that may interest some other people, probably some niggas who are Masons. But he goes on to New Haven High School. He went there for only 2 years until he went to the Hopkins School from 1868 to 1870. Now, this Hopkins School was a college prep school, like a top of the line school where they recruit students. Students get sent there to prepare them for college because these students are, too smart for the regular schools. They outshine all the other students. They say, okay, if we take these students and we prep them for college, we can really raise and teach some revolutionary acts, especially back in these 1800s where there's still a whole lot to discover. He graduates this Hopkins School in 1870 as the valedictorian. The valedictorian who gets the best grades in the school, the valedictorian who usually tends to give the speech at the graduation ceremony because they got the highest grades. Yeah, Edward, my nigga Ed, graduates valedictorian. So we see he gets recruited to this top of the line school and also graduates as valedictorian. We saw he was going to be destined for something great. Now, after graduating from this college prep school, Edward Alexander Boucher attends Yale. And back then it was called Yale College. It wasn't yet listed as a university. But he goes to Yale and he gets his school paid for by a Quaker named Alfred Cope. Now, this Alfred Cope man said that, okay, I want to pay for your schooling. I want to send you to Yale. I want you to go to school for free on my dollar, as long as you promise that after you graduate, you come back to our school, you come back to our Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia, and you teach, because we see that you have a gift for intellect, you have a gift for education, and you will be useful in teaching other Black students. Now, this Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia was the first high school in the United States that was made for Black people. You had other schools that would accept Black students, but this school was made specifically for Black students at the time. And they wanted Edward to come teach there after he graduated from Yale. Now, he goes to Yale and he get his bachelor's degree in 1874. And like how he was the valedictorian of his high school, he ranked 6th in his class in Yale. Now, we know Yale is a very hard school to perform at, period. But our nigga Ed here ranks 6th in his class in his bachelor's degree. So we already know Ed, damn near a genius, very smart, very intelligent, highly capable. He ends up graduating with his Ph.D. in physics from Yale in 1876. Now, I didn't write this down, but if I remember correctly, he did his dissertation on the indices of different types of glass. And if I remember physics correctly, the index of glass is like how the reflection points come off the way glass is bent or the way glass is curved. So not some easy shit, not some shit that you finna see me studying or reading about because it's too damn hard and I really don't care. But Edward Alexander Boucher got a PhD in this field and wrote his dissertation on it, physics. Now, Patrick Francis Healy had a PhD in philosophy. This is a PhD in physics. So we not talking about some light shit. We not talking about something that's theoretical. We not talking about simply just being able to read books and memorize and put together theories and ideas. We talking about physics, a very hard science that I remember taking AP physics in high school and hating that class because it was like calculus, but on steroids. It was like calculus applied to science and applied to actual objects. Like that shit was crazy. But the first Black man to get his PhD had a PhD in it. So that's how smart Edward Alexander Boucher was in comparison to your Patrick Francis Healy, that white boy, PhD in philosophy. Like, that's cool, PhD. You got to be smart to get a PhD, but that's not touching no PhD in physics. I don't remember Patrick Francis Healy being a valedictorian of his college prep school, high school either. But, just listing some of these things that Edward Alexander Boucher is one of the first Black people to graduate from Yale ever. So in his class, there was some other Black students graduating from Yale, getting their bachelor's degrees as well. But he was one of the first. First of 20 Americans to earn a PhD in physics, period. Not just black people, not just black men, not just men. We talking first of 20 Americans, period, in all of American history to earn a PhD in physics. Lastly, the sixth person to earn a PhD in physics from Yale. So Edward is a part of elite company. Not only is he a part of elite company, but he did it while being black. He did it while looking black. He did it while identifying as black. He did that. Patrick Francis Healy, however, did it identifying as white, looking white, damn near being passed through life, given a pass because he looked white. We know Edward didn't receive them same benefits because after Edward graduated, he got his PhD. He had a hard time finding work because he was black. So since he was black, even though he had this PhD in physics, he had a hard time trying to find where to work. He did go on to teach. He taught, I believe he was a principal at a school at one point, and then he taught all the way up until, just getting old, getting up there in age, physical ailments kept him from continuing teaching. But so we see, to the left, we have Patrick Francis Healy, a 1/16th black man who I saw on a black website was labeled to be the first black man to earn a PhD. This dude, this white, super white, this dude looks so white, like it's not even funny. Like this is one of the whitest dudes. If you saw him outside, that'd be one of the whitest dudes you ever seen. 6.25% black. And we see on the right, Edward Alexander Boucher, undeniably black. Undeniably black. This is a dude you might see outside today, a dude who looked just like him in the face. I actually probably got a homeboy who looked like this nigga right here. So that's all this presentation was today. I saw that this Patrick Francis Healy character was labeled the first black man to earn a PhD. I said, who the fuck is that? And I decided to Google it. I seen this white boy on my screen and I had to dig deeper because I knew of Edward Alexander Boucher already. And I thought he was the first, and now I know he's the first still. Because we not finna call this 1/16th black man a black man. That's a white boy. Yeah, in 1842, he was a black dude. In 1852, black man. In 1862, he was a black man, but it's 2022. That white boy on the left side of your screen is not a black man. So websites need to stop calling him a black man. Stop calling him the first black man to earn a PhD. Stop calling him the first and only black man to be the president of Georgetown. Because other people are going to read these websites and think, oh, wow, Patrick Francis Healy. Oh, wow, he looks white. But, if they called him black and they still call him black today, I guess he was black, even though he didn't call himself black. But fortunately, when you do Google who was the first black man to earn a PhD, Edward Alexander Boucher pops up. Usually he pops up. So we got the gist. That just threw me for a loop when I saw it yesterday. So I had to do a presentation on it. Excuse me for not being in presentation mode. Got a little funky setup, with the dual setup is kind of weird trying to get it in dual screen and see the streamer at the same time. I'll have that fixed by the time I do my presentation on Wednesday on the drill music case study. But first presentation in a long time. I'm back. I'm still rusty, as y'all heard. I'm throat hurting, need some water, didn't drink tea before. Now my throat hurt. But we gonna close out this live stream. Hope everybody learned something. Learned a little something. I know I learned a little something doing research for this, but I'm finna take my ass to bed. Good night. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Peace.